Weiß Bescheid. Entiendo.
Being here this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an economist, I'm a speaker, I'm an author, but most of all, I am a curious person, and I love holding events like this. I love participating in events like this, where we can listen to people with great ideas, we can come together in human connection, we can talk about things that are important to us. So that is what we are doing here this evening. Before we get going, in the spirit of respect and truth, we acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional and ancestral territory of Treaty 7 First Nations and the home of Métis Nation. In the Blackfoot language, this land is known as Mokintsissis. And I practiced really hard saying that, so I hope I got it right. Oh, applause for that. A note about the venue this evening. Now, you might have noticed we are in a church, and some of you might have been surprised when you arrived at the address that was given on the invitation, and you may have said, is it in a church? In fact, I know some of you said that. Yeah, we are actually in St. Stephen's Anglican Church. I'm a member here at St. Stephen's. I'm actually on the leadership team of the church. But we want everyone to know that this facility is more than just where the Anglicans meet on Sunday morning. This is more than a church, it is a community space. This space is for everybody, regardless of any faith belief. Us at St. Stephen's, we strive to make this facility around art and culture and exchange of ideas, and that's what we're doing here tonight. So everyone should feel welcome. Plus, the windows are really beautiful in here, so I have one friend who, every time I hold an event here, she says, it's in a church, I might burst into flames. To date, she has not yet burst into flames, but you never know, but I think she's okay. But if anyone tonight does feel they're about to burst into flames, maybe just indicate with your hand in advance, because if you do, we would like to capture that on video for the church newsletter. That would be fantastic to have that. Our TikTok reel would really enjoy that. But we do want everyone to feel welcome and comfortable. A note about the washrooms. I guess when this church was built in 1951, no one had to pee. So the washrooms are actually a little bit of a challenge to find. You have to go out those doors through two sets of doors and either take the stairs or the elevator down. It's all pretty clearly marked. But if you do need a washroom, you are going to have to go downstairs. A note about a couple of sponsors this evening. Is anyone from Blackline Safety here tonight? Blackline Safety is a great Calgary homegrown company. They were gracious enough to help cover some of the costs of the facility tonight. So we're very thankful to Blackline Safety. And I do want to point out my partner, Jason. Where's Jason? Jason covered all the wine tonight. Yay! And he doesn't even drink wine, so it's even sort of doubly ironic about that. But thank you, Jason, for that. We also want to point out Drew Sherbin. Drew is with the Canadian Mental Health Association. Some of you might have seen him and the table set up just outside as you came in. Oh, there's Drew. Drew is here tonight. We invited Drew from the Canadian Mental Health Society Association because we feel that what we are talking about tonight might raise some issues with people. People might be feeling anxious, and there are mental wellness issues that every one of us might be dealing with. So we wanted to have Drew here tonight. He has resources outside. Feel free to stop by. If you or anyone you know might benefit from some of those resources. So thank you for being here tonight, Drew. We appreciate it very much. In 1973, a young high school student by the name of Judith Miles won a contest. Now, Judith was a very curious person about nature and things around her. The contest was being sponsored by NASA. NASA in 1973 was looking for good ideas that their astronauts and engineers could use for experiments in zero gravity. At the time, it was at Space Lab. So NASA put it out to a contest to high school students, and Judith Miles from Connecticut won. Her idea was, why don't you take spiders up to zero gravity to see what they would do? Because on Earth, Judith would watch spiders build their web. She would watch them lower themselves down, as we've all done, using their body's weight and using gravity to build tension in the web. And Judith was really curious to know, just what would a spider do without gravity? Would they be able to build a web? Would they even try? So NASA said, that is the best idea we've ever heard. You win the top prize. In 1974, 2008, and 2011, NASA has been conducting a series of experiments with spiders in zero gravity. Now, my co-author out there is Rob Roach out there. He and I have written actually 2 books titled Spiders in Space, Adapting to Sudden Unwanted Change, inspired by the story of the spiders. Because the spider, when they get up to zero gravity, in the 2011 round of experiments, they actually named one of the spiders Esmeralda. And Esmeralda, when she got up to the International Space Station, she crawled out of the little tube that they had put her in. She got into the container that was set up for her, and she was in trouble. All of a sudden, she was drifting around in zero gravity. And she started to do what every hungry spider does, and that is start to build a web. But it was not going well for Esmeralda. You can imagine her dilemma. With no gravity, her threads were just sort of drifting around aimlessly in the container, and it was not looking like she was going to build a workable web. After a short period of time in which Esmeralda was a bit dormant and she was just kind of curled up in the corner, but after a short period of time, Esmeralda got busy. She started to teach herself new techniques. She learned to propel herself off the edge of the container and build tension in her web that way. She made adjustments to the thickness of the thread, spinning a thinner thread that worked better with her new technique. And she came up with a totally new design of web. Rather than a web that radiates from the center outward, like it would here on Earth, she started in the corner of the container and used a bit of a windshield wiper motion, moving back and forth, building her web radiating from the corner outward. It was a totally new design of web. Now, needless to say, the astronauts were amazed and fascinated by this, how a spider was able to adapt to very unwanted, very sudden change. The spider did not have 10 million years of evolution to figure out how to adapt to this new environment. Suddenly, everything the spider knew about its environment here on Earth, having gravity and a web technique that worked, suddenly that's gone. But Esmeralda figured it out. She was able to build a workable web. It wasn't a perfect web, but she was able to design a brand new structure of web, a workable web in zero gravity. Now, when I first read this story, I was inspired by it because I thought there has got to be lessons in here for us humans. How do we adapt when we are hit with the unexpected, when we are hit with unwanted change, when we are hit with uncertainty and chaos? A couple of the lessons that Rob and I drew out. The first one was know your story. Now, I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist on spiders. I don't know what was going through the spider's brain. But you notice that the spider in zero gravity didn't have to reinvent herself. She knew her story was about spinning web. Spiders are trappers. They spin web to trap their prey. That is their story, and that story doesn't change in zero gravity. She didn't have to become some sort of predator hunter spider that was not in her DNA. She just had to figure out, how do I live out my DNA in this totally foreign, totally new environment? I always like to joke that if the spiders were humans in that situation, the first thing the spiders would do is form a committee, right? They would say, we got a big problem on our hands. We're going to strike a committee. The committee is going to go away for 6 months, and they're going to go to a conference room somewhere, and they're going to have easels and giant cookies, and they're going to ideate, and they're going to do all the things that we as humans do when we are faced with disruption, when we are faced with a challenge or a problem. And if the spiders were humans, that committee of spiders, they would have come back with one solution, and that is, we need these astronauts to bring us back to Earth right this minute. That is the solution. That is going to solve the problem. And they might have lobbied the astronauts and said, maybe hold little pickets and say, we need to go back to Earth right now. And that actually would have been an okay outcome for the spiders. But fortunately for the spiders, they don't form committees. They didn't lobby the astronauts. They just got on with doing what they know how to do. They just had to do it in a very different way. The other thing that I love about the spider story and is a lesson for us is when we are hit with unwanted change, we need to give ourselves some grace and some patience, because even Esmeralda, she didn't knock it out of the park right off the bat. She did not climb into her new container in zero gravity and just spin the brand new web. It took her a while. There was some trial and error. And there was a time when she was not really moving around too much at all. You might say, in human terms, she was in a bit of shock. And often when we are hit with that sudden unwanted change, we're not going to knock it out of the park right off the bat. We might need to give ourselves some grace and some patience. We might need to allow ourselves maybe just to wallow a little bit as we regroup and refocus on the task at hand. And the last lesson, and one that I think is probably really near and dear to my heart, is around creativity. I know Leanna Robrecht, who designed this spider pin, by the way, for me. Some of you were commenting on the spider pin. This is the spider story. Yeah, it's beautiful. Leanna is one of the most creative. She's a chef. She's a jewelry designer. Anything creative you need, Leanna is your gal. But the spiders were creative. They had to use their creativity and their imagination when they were hit with this unwanted change to design a brand new structure of web. So the spider's story, Rob and I, we wrote those 2 books. What we did with those books is, inspired by the spider's story, we went and found human spiders. In other words, we found human beings, businesses, not-for-profits, athletes, who faced a similar story, and that is their world was turned upside down in an instant. Not over 10 years of, changing business environment. Often it was a phone call, and everything about that person changed. I won't point her out, but one of the spiders is actually here tonight. And she knows who she is, but you might have to buy the book to find out who it was. But all of these people had that similar story. They were all hit abruptly, sideswiped with this unwanted change. Rob and I did intense one-on-one interviews with these spiders. We wanted to understand their story. We wanted to understand what are the traits and characteristics that were present in each one of those adapters. And if we could make a list of these traits and characteristics, we can maybe distill it down to, here are a list of traits that are really useful when you are hit with unwanted change. In our first book, we came up with a list of 11. It's a really awkward number, and there is a Spinal Tap reference in there for those of us over the age of 50. Yeah, if you're under 50, Google it later, you'll find out. But our list went to 11. We didn't quite have 12, which would have made a dozen, and we had more than 10, which is a nice number for a list. Awkwardly, our list went to 11. But we came up with a list of traits, human traits and characteristics, that were present in these successful adapters. And then when COVID hit, it was the granddaddy of sudden unwanted change, probably the very best example any of us could ever imagine. The whole world suddenly having to adapt, suddenly hit with this change. So we decided it was time for a sequel, and we wrote Spiders in COVID Space, basically repeating the experiment, but this time talking to individuals and businesses and not-for-profits that adapted in really creative, innovative ways during COVID. And what we found there is a different list of characteristics. A lot of the ones, the 11 original characteristics, were also present. But during COVID, it was very interesting because during that pandemic, the list of traits that were helpful in adapting, we noticed had a lot more to do with human connection. They weren't quite as present in the original list, which was 2017. But by 2021, successful adapters understood the importance of human connection. It was things around building community. It was things around having trust in your team members, trust in your workers, trust in your customers. And it was about building bonds with other people, sometimes your customers. But interestingly, we heard a lot of businesses talk about we had to build relationships with our competitors. We always knew who the competitors were, and we were friendly. We'd wave at trade shows or whatever. But during COVID, they had to tie their life rafts together. And even though they were competitors, very much they were in this COVID together. So we saw during COVID how human connection was probably the single greatest trait and attribute for adapting to sudden unwanted change. But enough about me, enough about the spiders in space. Tonight, I want to introduce you to an amazing friend I've made. Melanie Marshall. We first met, I think, in Nashville. We were part of a speaker training and development program for professional speakers. And I hadn't met Mel before then, but our conference was in Nashville. And I don't even know if you remember this, but you were doing, and by the way, there's nothing more terrifying for a professional speaker than speaking in front of an audience of professional speakers. It is terrifying. But Mel did it. She got up and she gave this talk. I knew nothing about her other than she talked about being from the BBC. And I said, she doesn't sound British, but I don't know. Anyway, I went and talked to her later. It turns out she's from Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm like, I love you even more now. So we instantly became friends, I think it's fair to say, and we've been friends ever since then. And Mel reached out to me a few months ago, maybe a year, I forget, maybe last summer. And she's now based in Toronto, but she said, Todd, I don't actually know very many people in Calgary. And as a professional speaker, we're all hustling. We're all trying to find our next gig. She said, if I came out to Calgary, could you introduce me to a few people that you might know? And I said, well, why don't we just put on a whole event? Why don't we pack the place out? Now, originally I thought, I bet I can get 30 people, maybe 50 people. I thought Mel can't come all the way out from Toronto and, there's 12 people sitting here. So I thought we're going to shoot for 50. And then I said, no, I'm going to try to get 100 people. But by the time we advertised this and the title of the talk, by the way, we're not doomed, we ended up with 230 some people registered. Some obviously weren't able to make it tonight, but it is a nice full packed room. I'm so happy that you were here to join me in welcoming Mel. A little bit about Mel. For over 20 years, she was a journalist, foreign correspondent with the BBC, stationed all over the world, particularly Afghanistan, but lots of places in the Middle East, some of the riskiest places in the world. She has won a Peabody Award, which, if you are in that world of journalism, a Peabody Award is a big deal. And it's particularly around storytelling, isn't it? It's an award to journalists who have been very effective in using story to convey what is going on. So she's won a Peabody Award, multiple Emmy Awards, nominations, and also, what is it, the Edmund, I've forgotten the name of it. Okay. But some other award, the name of which I can't remember, but she's award-winning. Let's just leave it at that. She, on her own dime, came out from Toronto to Calgary. So please join me in welcoming, giving a good, hearty Calgary. No yahoos. We don't need to do that. No, not quite yet. But applause. Well, yahoo if you must. But let's give a good Calgary welcome to my dear friend, Melanie Marshall.
Thank you, sweetie. Well, I wouldn't mind a Yahoo. I'll give you a Yahoo. Why not? Don't we all need a Todd in our lives? Yeah. I've learned a little lesson about saying things like, hey, Todd, could you introduce me to a few people? And I'm so grateful that you could come and be here tonight. I'd like us to think of this as a conversation. As much as Todd and I are here to speak to you about what we know, this is really about what we can discuss and learn together, because that is how we get through difficult times. Speaking of tough times, reminds me of a story. No pressure on the storytelling. March 2022 in Ukraine. It was a dark time. Literally. I was in a closet with COVID by myself in a basement while the air raid sirens were going off, and we were worried that the Russians were about to take Odessa because they wanted to take that port and encircle the entire country. And yes, you got that right. I was by myself in a closet in the basement with COVID because I had gone in to open up our Southern Front coverage and promptly gotten COVID. And I had told my team, go ahead, we got to get the story, I'll be fine. And you know, you don't really know self-pity until you are sitting in your own bomb shelter, which is a hotel closet in the basement. And it would be easy at a time like that to think, wow, I'm doomed. But doom is really, to me, a feeling of powerlessness. And so when Todd said, what do you want to call this night? I said, by the way, we're not doomed. Because even in that night, sitting in that closet, feeling arguably very sorry for myself, what I really wanted, it was not doom I was feeling, it was sort of powerlessness. It was kind of wanting to call my mom, but knowing it wasn't a great idea to call her and tell her what the situation was. I was aware of that. And I think for a lot of us, if we are feeling that these are difficult times, for whatever reason, because we could all be sitting in this room and have different perspectives on what makes it hard, there is probably something underneath that. Fear, powerlessness, grief, which leads to this feeling that maybe nothing we do matters. And I don't believe that. Has anyone here, this is a great time, I'm like, I don't believe it, now show me if you felt that way. Has anyone here felt over the past month like maybe what you do doesn't matter and you're just awash in the sea? Anyone? Yeah, one or two in the back, maybe, not sure. Okay, so here's my invitation for the next little part of my chat. My invitation to you is to consider that when we think we're doomed, it is actually because we are confusing uncertainty for powerlessness. And that when we can get ourselves on track with some strategies for how to feel more agency in difficult times, and one of the good things about having been in quite a few sticky situations, not always where people are bringing you orange juice and knocking on the door to ask if you're okay, like with me in my bomb shelter for one, then we can start to find ways to move forward feeling more powerful, even if absolutely nothing has changed. Because I'm not asking you to pretend that everything is fine. I'm just inviting you to consider there might be a way to find light in the darkness. That's all. I think the first principle, and Todd hit at this with his spider, but I'm going to go with humans because I don't have a spider, is you have to have something to hold on to inside of yourself. And I call this principle, and anyone who ever worked for me around the world knows this principle, and because I'm standing on a church stage, I'm going to clean it up a little. You can't ride two horses with one behind. You can do the original in your head. And I used to say that to people everywhere, because the truth is that if you are trying to do a bunch of different things, you're trying to fight against all the stuff that's making you really upset, you are afraid of everything that's happening in your business, and you are trying to care about the thing you really care about, it can be very hard to move forward. But if you hold fast to what really matters most to you, it opens up space to move. The first time I ever went anywhere truly awful, I was a baby. And I went with a man who would become my work dad. I call him that to this day, even though he's retired now and mostly chainsaws off in the woods. And his name is Cookie, and he's important. He's important to me. He should be important to everyone. And Cookie and I went to the Dominican Republic because there had been a mudslide so severe that thousands of people had been wiped out in the course of minutes. Mud had swept into a village on the border with Haiti and wiped people out of their homes and then receded. And it was as if thousands of people's lives were gone. And I'd never been in a circumstance like that before. I had never had to operate as a good human in that space. And I'd never seen some of the things that I saw there. And we were sent in, as I would learn over 20 years, would be always the way, with no support, no money, no resources. That you get used to. But for me, what I still find hard is suffering. In some ways, death is easy. When people are hurting, it is hard. And we had gone down to a clinic to try, and there was nobody left alive for the most part. There were people in the trees, and there were people under the mud. And so we drove down to a clinic to try and speak to one of the doctors about what they were doing. And there was a woman there who had lost 5 children in the mud. She had been standing on her table trying to hold on to them, and they'd been swept away from her. And she was quite literally insane with grief at that point, as I think we can all understand. And when she didn't know what we were saying, but she knew we were foreigners and she knew we were there, and we had a car. And because I was talking and she sensed that I was emotionally available, she started begging me in Spanish to take her back to where she had last seen her children. And I knew that was not the right thing to do. But in the world of cutthroat world, sometimes of broadcast journalism, people don't always do the right thing. In the cutthroat world of almost anything, people don't always do the right thing, right? And we had people on our tail, right, coming to do the story. And this woman is holding on to me begging. And I looked over at Cookie, and as if to say, like, what are we going to do? And he looked at me and said, of course not, Marshall. And I thought, I'm going to follow this guy anywhere. And he probably regrets that, because like 25 years later, I still am. You know, I call him, I call his wife, I get him to hit the phone. And I'm not telling you that story to shock you. I'm telling you that story because he had such a sense of what mattered to him and who he was as a human, that nothing shook that. Not getting the story or getting ahead. And it modeled it for me, and it modeled what it was okay to be. It told me which horse to ride and how I could ride. And it doesn't have to be something like that. We mentioned Ukraine. When I finally was let out of the closet, I met a man named Igor, who was the head zookeeper at the Odessa Zoo. Now, we often have a joke that when you go to the zoo, it's when the story is over, but in this case it wasn't. It was because the local something really cool going on at the zoo. I think we should go there. And I love animals, so it didn't take a huge amount of convincing. And we get there, and there's this guy named Igor who's gigantic. And he has this gigantic wolf dog that looks like it could take your leg off. And in Igor's office, he has budgies and guinea pigs. And because Igor is taking in all of the pets of people who are having to flee and leave their animals behind. And he is staying behind to take care of the elephant that is afraid of the munitions. And he is sleeping there at night with his giant wolf dog, who is actually super sweet. And when we said, well, aren't you worried? He said, well, but somebody has to take care of the animals. And when people come back, they're going to need to go to the zoo and have a good time. He wasn't holding on to something grand. This wasn't geopolitical ideology. This was just what mattered to him that gave him what I would call bravery. Often we think it has to be something like, really abstract. It isn't. So my invitation to you would be to consider what already makes you move. What is the equivalent of your room full of budgies? I hope that's not me, John. Because something already has. I'm sure of that. There's something already where you were showing up. And the good news is we don't have to do it alone. We've already touched on this, and we're doing it tonight. We don't move alone. We do this together. Can you guys imagine if, Okotoks was all that stood between Canada and total domination by a foreign power? Don't laugh, okay? Because it could, you never know. In Ukraine again, and I think Ukraine's really been on my mind, which is because I've been thinking about it. I've just been thinking about it a lot. We went to a town called Voznесens. Voznesens had about 35,000 people when everybody was home. And we went there because we heard improbably they had held back a Russian advance. First person we met was a woman named Svetlana. And I loved Svetlana because Svetlana was a pensioner, now a farmer. She was absolutely no nonsense. And we said, hey, we want to talk to you about the fact you guys turned back the Russians? And she said, yes, but first I have to show you what they did to my toilet. They invaded, yes, but they blew up my toilet. And that's sacred, which I think a lot of us could agree with as well. And it turned out it was true. This small town had been targeted because it had a strategic bridge that led to the south. But everybody was so busy with, very understandably, air raids over Kyiv, the advance in the east, that there was no help coming. So when somebody popped over Svetlana's, she said it was a Chechen soldier popped over and said, we're here to liberate you from the Nazis, she tried to beat him with a stick. Now, she ended up getting held hostage, but that didn't stop her from berating him. And it didn't stop her and her husband from doing everything she could to keep the prisoners of war alive. And the reason I say this is important about community is because what happened next was word of mouth started traveling to all the people left in Okotoks, Ukraine. And a couple of the guys who had hunting rifles set up ambushes. One guy who had learned how to make Molotov cocktails off YouTube got to work, and boy was he happy when he met us. He's like, I've got so much video to show you. And there's all this video of him being like, "Get it, my beauties!" And finally, all of these guys blew up the bridge. And the Russians turned tail and left. And they went so fast, they actually left their dead behind. And the funeral director went and collected their dead and gave them a decent burial. We go together. That, to me, is a great example of how, and then the Ukrainian army showed up. But if you ask now, my colleague who was there, he's actually written a book about this, and he's spoken to military strategists who say what they did as a small group, not that dissimilar from us, actually changed the course of the war in a small way. But did they set out to do it? Did they know they were going to? No. They just each did their part together, communicating with each other, helping each other out, feeling bitter about their toilets. And it reminds me of another toilet story. Here we go. You don't necessarily have to turn back a foreign invasion to do this. Apologies to the men here, but has anyone here ever cried in a ladies' room? Anyone want to admit it? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I have. During the Arab Spring, I was sobbing my heart out in the Cairo Marriott. And in the bathroom, it was about 2 a.m. I'd been done wrong by someone who had done me wrong in a lot of other places. And you know the kind of crying that you do when you think you're never going to stop crying? Has anyone ever done that kind of crying? Yeah, anyway, more hands go up for this one. And I thought to myself, you know, this was somebody I'm supposed to be really close to. They know me. And how could they let me down like this? And this is, I will put money on this. And I don't gamble because I'm not good at it. But when everything else fails, someone will not. And it may not be your family. It may not be your friends. It may not be your work. But someone will not. Because while I was crying my eyes out in this bathroom, I heard, and I thought, no, I am busy. And I said, I'm crying. I'm busy crying. And a gentle voice in Arabic said something which I can only imagine was, let me in, because my Arabic's awful. And then insistent knocking continued until I realized I was going to have to open the door. And I opened the door, and there was this beautiful woman. Her eyes were heavily cold, and she said, no cry, no cry. And I said, I have to cry. And I pointed to my heart. I said, my heart is broken. And she said, no cry, no cry. And I'm like, well, what aren't you getting here? Is this your first time in a woman's bathroom? And she reached out and she put her hand on my heart and she said, no cry, no cry. Which I don't know if you've ever had someone show you compassion when you're really feeling bad. I cried harder. And then she said, because I think she realized she had a hard case, no cry, dance, dance. And I thought, well, I guess I have to dance. So she and I stood there at about 2:30 in the morning in the Cairo Marriott bathroom, me crying, her smiling, us dancing, until I stopped crying and realized that when everyone else had failed me, someone had not. That one knock on the door had changed something for me. I don't know her name, but I wish her well every time I think about her or speak about her. It's so simple to be the knock on the door. We think we have to do something, we think, well, I'm really worried about the climate, or I'm really worried about education, or I'm really worried about this, so I have to save that. You really don't. You just have to knock on the door. It's like the Mr. Rogers thing where we look for the helpers, and I think that's super important. But if you want to regain agency and stop feeling so doomed, be the helper in a very small way. I promise. And I did, by the way, walk out that door with my head held high mostly, and on into the next thing. But the truth is that when we are all in this together, it only really works if we then get out into the real world. Which we are here. We are in the real world, although I don't know, I don't have that much snacks and wine in my real world, so. There is an element of this where the more we can put ourselves in contact with reality, the more we are going to see the people, the opportunities, and the reality of the risks we're facing rather than whatever terrors live inside our head about the world and each other. And it is, look, sometimes there's a time to duck and cover. I remember being in Tripoli and I was chatting because Gaddafi was gone and we were like, oh, everything's really relaxed now, and I'm chit-chatting, and it's about from here to that stool, and I felt this choo go by my head. And if you feel that drop to the ground, because that's a sniper's bullet, then you want to drop to the ground and you dig right in, just dig right in, and just stay down for a bit. But then you need to get up and move. Just one. I think back to going to Tacloban, which is a place in the Philippines where there had been, they used to call me a little bit natural disaster for a reason. There had been a horrible typhoon, and I had gone to cover that. And first I managed to get mugged in the supermarket buying supplies on the way. So that was number one. Nice work, right? Tom, I know, she's won international awards. But she didn't watch her purse. But people are mostly good. Generally, people are mostly good. Just that one time. But I got mugged, and I still paid for the groceries and managed to get on a private plane without a passport and landed with all of our stuff in Tacloban. Contact with reality was fine. Everybody still helps out. You just had to get out there. If I would have let that be the end of the story, I mean, the part where I asked the cops in the capital, I said, in Manila, I said, do you think I managed to see my purse again? And oh, how they laughed. Oh, yeah, they were like, oh, where's she from? Canada? Oh, Lethbridge? Oh. And Tacloban was a place that had been utterly destroyed, as a lot of these places are. In a way, when we say that, I'm not say we're not doomed, because we're not. It's because I see places where you think, wow, this place is doomed. Right? There's nothing left. There's not a roof left. And even then, there's not. And we had hired some gentleman named Troy to drive us around. So we had a vehicle that was working, and we had gas in the tanks, and we needed to work. Charm. And keep us all awake the next day morning. Tell these. Wasn't thinking, where are we going to be in 3 weeks? But I found somewhere. And so then I was like, okay, we got to get everybody moved. And now, Troy, come on, we got to go. We got to cover this. We got to do a film. We got to do everything, Little Tasmanian Albertan devil. And Troy, who is amazing and peppy and smiley, and I was like, whoa, because the next thing to do was to stop. Right? The what would cookie do rule. And I said, Troy, what's wrong? And he said, well, I'm so worried about my family. First, he'd mentioned this because he was afraid if he told us. So, because I did need his help, but he needed ours. And that's what we did. And his wife Mireille came to the hotel, and she's like, "I'm going nuts. I can't bear this. What can I do?" And I was like, "Well, we are really sick of eating boil in a bag. If we could get food, would you be willing to cook for us?" We were the best fed journalists in that disaster. This isn't to say it was all perfect, it's just to say that none of these things were miraculous. Step by step. And for any of us, when we're doing this, if you think about when you have been in a disaster or when you've been in something difficult, a real crisis, sometimes it's easier when you're busy. Do you all know that one where it's easier when it's all happening? You just do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And when you do that, sometimes you end up finding, okay, well, actually, this is going to help, and then this is going to help. Because the truth is, you cannot see 5 years down the road. You're lucky if you can see 5 minutes. So don't worry about the 5-year plan. Worry about your 5-minute plan. For any of this. And with what's right in front of you. And going back to sayings that I claim for myself now. Perspective, Marshall, perspective. That's from Cookie. Occasionally I've lost it. I think we all do. We can feel like this time is forever. And it's not. It's that we are stuck in kind of an island of our own time, of our own feeling, of our own fear. And we believe we can see the horizon, even though we've never been able to see the horizon. Todd was talking about COVID. Does anyone remember COVID and how it felt like it was going to last forever? How far away does it feel now? I was telling you about Andre, my colleague in Ukraine. Andre, about a year ago, I'd go, "How are you doing? I'm thinking about you and wondering how you are." And he said, "Oh, Melanie, I've got terrible news." And I said, "Oh my God, what's happened?" Because in my head, of course, there's only one. Something horrible has happened. He had family that was still in Russian-occupied territory, so something awful has happened. And he said, "Melanie, I've got to tell you, White Ward," this was his heavy metal band, "White Ward is broken up." I was like, "Andre, that's horrible. I'm really sorry." I don't know what to tell you, man. Not every band lasts forever, It can't all be the Rolling Stones. He's like, "Who?" But he'd already started 3 more bands, and then he said, "And you know what? Let me send you a picture." 3 pictures pop up. His girlfriend and him had adopted a puppy. So our perspective and other people's can be very different. We think we know how a story is going to go, and we don't. We think we know where the end point is. We don't. We're just where we are now. I was talking about Troy and Mireille. When I flew away from Tacloban, I remember thinking, well, I've left them in the worst place. How are they ever going to recover? Now I go off to my wonderful home in Singapore. I go back to my good life. All of the survivor guilt you can imagine. 2 weeks ago, I saw pictures of the 2 of them celebrating their wedding anniversary on the beach, being adorable together. A year ago, I was watching their kids graduate high school. The perspective that I had at the time of what their doom and where their story might go, A, wasn't theirs. it was mine, and B, it's not the truth now. We don't always know. And that is not to deny the hard stuff, because this is where I get to the hard stuff. I probably should have warned you there was going to be hard stuff at the beginning, but you probably figured it out. I'm going to tell you the hard stuff in two parts. Number one, we're going to lose. Anyone here, if I say the words and then I got a phone call, probably everyone here knows that feeling, right? It's pretty much never a good time to get a phone call at 6 a.m. or after midnight. I remember being in the Middle East. I used to run the Jerusalem Bureau for the BBC, and I got a call at 6 a.m. from my desk in London to tell me that a fellow journalist that I knew, Shireen, had been shot and killed that morning, covering a story just outside of Geneva. And who was close to that were me, and tell them that she had passed. And there are losses that cannot be undone. When you have to tell somebody that they have lost someone they love and care about and respect, and when you have to just be there with people in their grief, you can't pretend that is, just plucky, get on through it, and nor should you. And we don't move on from these things. I think we move on with what we carry, we move on with what we honor. What I remember from that day was saying to 2 or 3 of my staffers, look, after listening to grown men cry, saying, look, I'll figure it out. I don't know how, but if you need to not work today, I will figure it out. And them saying, absolutely not. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to go do the story. I'll be in the car. I'll see you in an hour. They honored what she stood for, and I think a lot of us do that every day, and it's a way we move through what we've lost. What we carry. It does not get rid of it. It just means we live to fight another day. We live to see a different part of the story unfold. And the second part of this, and this is the part you aren't going to like me for, the sad stuff you can probably handle. But this part, this is the hard stuff. People we don't like and we think are wrong. You guys are like, well, I'm back to the wine. Feel free, go back and get yourself a glass for this. There is no way to defeat doom as a concept just in amongst the people you already think are smart and good and right. It has never happened anywhere that all of the people disagreed with in a society have just disappeared and peace has been made. And the gift of living in North American society, and I realize I'm taking a risk saying this, but I got to say it anyway, is that this isn't broken. This might be battered and bruised. It might be hard. We might not like each other sometimes, but we're not broken. And we need to remember that. And that requires work. But it is a lot less work than putting together a society. Like, for example, Afghanistan, where I spent a lot of time. A place that I love. That to piece back together, despite the goodwill and desire of so many. to Cambodia, and I'm going to name drop. I don't have that many. I don't have a lot of cool economist names to drop, but there are, it's true, there are, aren't there? I went to Cambodia to make a film with Angelina Jolie. And it was really, I was excited because they were like, you can go and make a film about the power of memory and how they've recovered from the Cambodian genocide. And I was like, great. But your first post-divorce interview, right? And so I used to get to go through the lovely and really interesting, just wore his journalism stripes in a gentle way. We had a great time. I mean, we were at Angkor Wat doing film premieres, and then I'm like, I really want to interview a torturer. And everybody's like, oh, Mel, why can't we just have the film premiere for once? And I'm like, no, because I wanted to know, right? I want to know, how could you do that? And we met a granddad now who was a banana seller. And if he was sitting here in the room, you would not know it was him, because he doesn't wear "I used to torture people" on his face. You couldn't tell. And we went off and we were interviewing him for about an hour. He tortured people at a really famous prison called Tuol Sleng, which most of people, I think, escaped. And we interviewed. And most of my questions were, well, could you have made a different choice? Well, why didn't you try? Well, what did you do? And finally, Chum put his hand on my shoulder. And he was like, no. He did the best he could. And the reason that's remarkable is because Chum survived the genocide. Chum lost family members to that regime. And if Chum could be like, Mel, you're going a little hard on the Khmer Rouge guy, it made me think that maybe I could be a bit of a better person about speaking to people on all sides. And it's a general rule, and my invitation to you is go talk to someone about their dog or their bananas, but don't give up on the idea. Because there is. Have a little more pep in their step than some. I'd be like, whoa, I thought there'd be more bullets. Zone or a disaster zone or a conflict zone where there is not laughter. And the Brazilian peacekeepers laughed. My team laughed. The distressed Haitians who just suffered another round of flooding laughed. Everyone laughed. So I've never been anywhere that there isn't laughter, even if I've had to be the cause of it. It is glue that connects us. It is what reminds us of why we're bothering to try and get through. literally, if you have to like put a little picture, you know, your family or your pets in there, put your little song in for your dance party, do whatever you have to do to put it in there. Because it exists everywhere. In all places. In this room, right? Think about all of in what I think of as hope. This is what I call hope. Not something grand or stars streaking across the sky, but like small h hope. Like sitting down hope here. Discipline, practice. Good people believing in something, doing it together, one step at a time, having a laugh. Where was I maybe wrong once, and where might I be wrong again? That's a tough one. We don't have all night, or I would study hard. And I ask you not to leave this room without deciding which horse you want to ride, doom or hope. Because you cannot ride two horses with one behind people. One horse is much easier. Hope demands more of you. Doing these things demands more of you. But it is possible. Uncertainty does not mean that nothing you do matters. In fact, it's why we bother. Because we might
was not playing Candy Crush or texting other people. I was
totally
busy on my phone. Well, I'm always self-conscious sitting in the front row being on my phone while someone's speaking, but I was taking some notes because there were several things that you said that really jumped out. And now you were going to answer for these. No. It's not powerlessness. I love and it's my job, if I'm doing it well, to help them understand the situation. Doesn't mean the situation goes away, but if people can understand the situation, the fear level comes down. But I want you to say a little more about powerlessness. That's a big word versus uncertainty.
It is a big word, and I almost endemic when we asked me a question about interest rates the other day, and I said, "Well, you tell me, Todd."
I asked you about interest
You
rates.
said, "What do you making a joke? I'm making an economics joke for fun. It's look at me, I know money." Powerlessness is a big word that people where there can be this real danger now of power you'll feel.
I've got more questions, but I want to
yeah.
put it out to the audience if there are any questions from the floor.
I'll answer anything, just for the record.
Question, or are you about to burst into flames? So far, no flames. So question, go ahead. And I'll repeat it so that the people can hear it.
You have been and seen situations. Because right now, you appear joyful.
I am joyful. That's real. Yeah, I'm joyful and I'm an optimist about the world. I think I've been lucky to be in these places. I've met more. And so I don't necessarily think of it as coping. It's an interesting reframe. We find safety with each other. That is, we don't things to be key. Right? I had somebody that I trusted for advice and support. I have an amazing therapist that I taught to use Zoom, just for the record. I've sought out. Because it's really important to understand it's not all bad out there. So when I does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
One of the stories you told that I loved the best was Igor. Was that his name?
Which
And
one? Oh, Igor the zookeeper, yeah.
And that line, who's going to care for the budgies?
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes when we feel overwhelmed, maybe with anxiety or all the things.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was also about, he wasn't trying to say, well, who's going to figure out how to save, how to save the Ukrainian Navy?
Everyone.
D&D once upon a time, right? I don't know, risk, but they each did what they could.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Madeline.
Many of us think of our lives in chronological terms, but the way that you told in terms of emotional theme.
Uh,
The Donbass question,
Yeah, oh, okay.
sort of. How prospect required passport to come back to
Out of the blue, but
Is it-
go
well,
ahead.
Well, it's not entirely. That I know of. I'll question you after. I'm not going to go where you think I might. I'm going to go to Brexit. Referendum in the UK. And it was, I'm interested to hear what, I'm not. I'm going to say something economic though. That's why, because I don't want to get it wrong. But at the well, no, everybody will people who are doing well, right? People who are doing well that I knew were like, oh yeah, but you know, whatever, we're just having our fun, basically. And then it happened. And it was how to get out of it in a good way. And it's still a problem, not as much, but it's still a problem of social cohesion, right? It's still a problem where people feel hurt. Don't do that. Because that's how often we see in a lot of other places, and not just the States, by the way. Canada's obsessed with America for lots of good reasons. Where we then see conservative movements change massively. The UK is a great example. We see that Conservative Party was very different from the one we have now. I don't know what you think, Todd. Now I am deflecting. It's not deflecting so much as sharing the question.
Well, I wanted to shift back to
Yeah.
to your talk. We can maybe put a pin in that and
Yeah.
maybe over several glasses of wine get back into that. But two of the themes that you talked a lot about.
That's deflection, my friends. Well done. Well done.
Two of the themes that you talked about are two very important emotions. You talked a lot about grief. And it reminded me of a piece I wrote a couple of years ago, sort of comparing all the emotions in our lives to a dinner party. And the emotions are the guests at the dinner party. And there's all these wonderful guests there. And some like anxiety, some like sadness, some like jealousy, or maybe not quite as welcome, but others make life wonderful. But in the piece I made the point, there's really only two emotions, two guests at the dinner party you really need to pay attention to: joy and grief. Joy for the obvious reason. And as horrible as that dinner guest is, if we're prepared to sit with it and listen to it, it reminds us of love.
Yeah, I think, I love that, Todd. I love that. I think it's kind of sacred to be with people in their grief. I talked about how suffering is the hardest thing for me. Like, I have, yeah, sure, seen a lot of things that probably and right. Wala haram, wala haram. And it means it's not fair, because his brother had died. And you didn't have to speak Arabic. Like, I could have told you what he was saying, right? It's the sound of grief, it's the sound of love. And to be able to be with people respectfully in those moments, and for us to be able to stay a little bit longer with people when they're feeling that, I don't know, I think there's something sacred.
I think that is a wonderful note to wrap up on. We wanted to make sure that I promised everyone we would be finished by 8:30. We could probably keep talking for a long time.
We will.
We will.
Yeah.
Afterwards, there are lots of snacks and refreshments still out there, so I invite everyone maybe have a conversation with someone, maybe meet someone you hadn't met before, and maybe talk about something that stood out from what Mel was talking about.
A Spotify playlist, it's on your handout.
It is songs of. Yeah, so that is on the playbill. Mel, by the way, designed the playbill. It was way better than one she knew innately. Oh, not word. This is why Mel is here to promote herself. As professional speakers, we are in the business of sales. So we are selling.
He keeps reminding me of that, by the way. That's sorry.
And then just a couple of thank yous. Evka, where's Evka? Evka, who helped serve the drinks tonight. Thank you for that. Rob and Rob, best friend of 30 years, Rob Roach. Who was recruited this evening. Thank you so much for that. Patty, my mother-in-law. Patty is there. You for bringing the cooler and the ice and everything. Chad upstairs helping with tech. Yes, thank you, Chad. And Peter Clark, my amazing video guy. Peter's got to still be here. He keeps all of everything technology in my life in order. So thanks.
Thanks to all of you.
And thank you, maybe most of all, thank you for
thank
making
you.
your way. But thank you, Melanie, for making your way out to Calgary for this. It has been an absolute treat to hear you. And thank you, one and all, for coming tonight. And with that, have a wonderful evening. Make your way to the snacks. Thank you.